Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started here. Welcome to the Operation Public Safety Committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, December 6th. We have a lot of stuff going on today in our meeting, so we can go ahead and get started here. I'm going to ask Melissa, we do roll call, please.
Council President Boyce.
Here.
Councilmember Fincher.
Here.
Councilmember Core.
Here.
Councilmember Larmer.
Here.
Councilmember Michaud.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas.
Here.
And Councilmember Troutner.
Here.
Okay, everybody's here. Let's get started. So I'm going to move on to item number 3, motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, then moving second. In discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Let the record show unanimous pass. Move on to item 4 on the business A. We're going to be doing approval of the minutes for November 15th.
So moved. Second.
Second. Okay.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Let the record show unanimous pass. Move on to 4B, payments of the bills. Motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to authorize the payment of the bills.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Let the record show unanimous pass. We're going to move on to item C. Is it Kristen Holdsworth? And we're going to talk about some grants.
Good evening. I'm here to share that we have received a Department of Commerce grant to help with our comprehensive plan update. It's for $325,000. We gave you a preview of this when we were working on the contract with MIG and asked for authorization. This money, the $325,000, will help offset a portion of that cost. So tonight before you is a request to authorize the mayor to accept that grant on the city's behalf.
Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chair, I move to authorize the mayor to accept the Department of Commerce's grant in the amount of $325,000, amend the budget, and authorize expenditures of the grant funds, and authorize the mayor to sign the grant agreement and all necessary documents, subject to the final terms and conditions acceptable to the city attorney and economic and community development director.
Second.
I have a motion and multiple seconds. In discussion? Good. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Let the record show unanimous pass. Thank you, Commissioner.
Aye.
Thank you, Les. Okay, we're gonna
You
move on
bet.
to item 4D, and this is gonna be a consolidating budget. And Michelle Ferguson.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Michelle Ferguson, and I will be presenting the fourth quarter of 2022 budget adjustments. So the fourth quarter adjustment is reflecting an overall increase of $12,942,540. Previously approved budget expenditures total $7,219,130. And budget adjustments that have not been previously approved by council total $5,723,410. For the majority of the presentation, I'll be using rounded numbers, but as always, the ordinance and exhibits contain the exact budget figures. The expenditure increases of over $7.22 million that council has previously approved include $5.83 million in grants. The grants included in this budget change include $3.735 million grant from the Washington State Department of Transportation for the 76th Avenue South project, which council approved in July of 2021. There's also a grant for $1.074 million from the Washington State Administrative Office of the Courts that will be used for the reimbursement of costs related to the State versus Blake. Council approved this grant in September. Also included is $457,000 for the King County Land Acquisition Grant to purchase the Mendel property, which was approved by council in March. There's also $247,000 for the Summer Experience and Enrichment for Kids Grant, which will be used to support summer outdoor education and recreation opportunities for underserved school-age participants. This was also approved in March. $125,000 from the Washington State Administrative Office of the Courts, and this one will be for the community court, which was approved by council in September. Also included is $80,000 for the King Conservation District grant for parks maintenance and $75,000 for the King County grant for West Fenwick Park. And then lastly, there are 4 smaller grants that total $37,000 for various parks programs. Other expenses that council has approved include $611,000 to establish a budget for the 21 through 23 senior services levy, which was approved by council in March of 2021. Also is $439,000 to establish a budget for the 2022 art plan, which was approved by council in March of 2022. There is also a budget carry forward of $180,000 for fire expenses. So this was what I've been talking about during the monthly reports. There was an expense that was paid for in 2022 that should have been paid for in 2021. So we're kind of carry forward that budget so they don't go over. And then lastly, there's $154,000 to establish a budget for the citywide equity training program, which council approved in October. The remaining increases total $5.72 million that council has not yet approved. These include $1.47 million for the transfer of facilities life cycle funds to facility projects. So there's no additional expenditures except the fact that we're going to move them from an operating to a project budget. These life cycle projects are for roof repairs, HVAC, building maintenance, floor coverings, parking lot seal coats, and kitchen equipment. Also needed is $1.4 million to establish a budget for the use of some of the shuttered venue operating grant funds for the Showwear Center. And these will be for operating costs and capital expenditures, which include a cashiering management system and kitchen equipment. A budget change of $1.2 million is needed for the sewer fund for the sewer pass-through charges. These are completely offset by increased revenues. Also is a budget change for $820,000 that is needed to recognize an additional affordable housing sales tax revenues and associated expenditures. There will be $513,000 in additional revenues and expenditures budgeted. Then 60% of those revenues had restricted uses, so they'll be transferred to a holding project. So $307,000 will also be budgeted for use within that project. $630,000 is needed to be budgeted for parks-related true-ups, which include golf operating revenues, facilities projects, and parks capital projects, which include the Chestnut Ridge project, fee and lieu funds, Sun Meadows Park, and 4th and Willis. And then a budget change of $275,000 is also needed for a Transportation Improvement Board grant for the 240th Hogan Park sidewalk project. And then a budget change of $102,000 is needed for a transfer of funds from the Criminal Justice Fund balance to the courtroom renovation project. A budget transfer out from the Trial Court Improvement Fund for $51,000 needs to be created, and the use of $51,000 within the budgeted project. And last on the list is a decrease of $271,000 for the ARPA-funded grant analyst and human services planner positions that were not filled in 2022. So we're just going to put them back in the ARPA project. Are there any questions?
The $100,000 down for solid waste.
Oh, sorry, I skipped that one.
Yeah.
Yes. So we got some extra revenues from the recycling company, and we're just going to budget those revenues and the corresponding expenditures.
And that's for the mist pickup for the snow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think.
They're from earlier this year.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any question, guys? If not, I'm going to ask for a motion, please.
Thank you, Council President. I move to adopt ordinance number 4455, consolidating budget adjustments made between October 1st of 2022 and November 30th of 2022, reflecting an overall budget increase of $12,942,540.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Let the record show unanimous pass. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, as always. We'll move on to item 4E, and this is around housekeeping. Kaelene?
Hello. I'm Kaelene Nobis, a senior long-range planner with the Economic and Community Development Department, and I'm presenting to you today the housekeeping amendments for 2022 and proposed updates to that ordinance. So first, kind of just a brief overview of what exactly it is we're talking about. Housekeeping updates are updates that we do yearly or bi-yearly to the Kent zoning code that we do not consider to be substantial or in nature and won't change development in any kind of way. Oftentimes, there are errors that need to be fixed or updates that we need to make due to state laws or in order to make sure that we're in compliance with how we are currently administering our code. So we are near the end of the process. On November 14th, I came and presented to Economic and Community Development Committee the same items we're going to be talking about today, and then had information only on Land Use and Planning Board, and then a public hearing in which they've recommended that council move forward with approval. And so we're hoping that you do the same today.
Okay.
So I'm kind of going to just go over all of them briefly because there's only 7 and I can do that with the time we have today. But generally the changes fit into 2 buckets this year. They're either needed for legal reasons and updates because of RCW, or there's a couple changes that we have made due to clarity or ease of use in the zoning code. So the first change is in the definition of family. So State Bill 5235 in 2021 told us that we were no longer allowed to regulate based off of numbers of unrelated persons. So we did an audit of our code, and the only place in which anything limiting the number of persons, unrelated persons in a household, lives in the definition of family. So our change for that is just to remove the number, and also note that there are other codes that do still help us get at some of the things that we were intending with that ordinance, like the communal residences codes, group home codes, short-term rentals, and the international building code regulates the amount of room and space a person needs in a bedroom. And so we think that the code gets at that in other ways. The second is our definition of mixed use. We have a percentage for the amount of percent of required commercial buried in the mixed use definition. It's not considered land use best practice to have anything buried in a definitions table. So we have moved that to the mixed use code section, word for word. Nothing of that has changed, just its location should be easier for residents and developers to find. And then the third definition change is for opiate substitution treatment facility. The meat of this definition hasn't changed. It just refers to an outdated RCW and a WAC that no longer exists. So we kept all of the definition the same, but removed the citations to the RCW. Under clarification changes, the one that's probably the most complicated to explain is the multifamily minimum lot size calculation. So essentially what we did here is that we realized that our minimum lot size calculation was essentially double limiting the amount of density that could be built. And we were having an issue with this complicated formula that planners couldn't administer and that the public couldn't understand. And when we dove into it and looked at other cities, we realized that we're one of the few cities that has both a minimum lot size and a density. And so we opted for using only the density to determine how to calculate how much is allowed on a property. So for an example, before, if you wanted to build a fourplex in some of our zones, you would have to do this complicated formula of this is how much land area you need per unit, and it was different than the density calculation, both essentially getting at the same thing. So we opted to remove one calculation in favor of the other, but everything else remains the same, including the density allowed, minimum lot width, lot coverage. Nothing different will result in this. It just will be easier for us to determine how many lots can be built and for developers to then use that information. The next clarification change is that oftentimes when we come to you with things like this, there are still pieces that we didn't catch. And so in Rally the Valley, there was a lot of code that was moved around and a bunch of extra footnotes that should have been deleted when they were moved from one table to another were never deleted from the original table. So we are deleting them from the original table so that we can fix that up now. But they're not referenced anywhere in the code. They're kind of just erroneous footnotes that live there.
Okay.
And so the other clarification changes is, of course, incorporating the items that I spoke about that were being removed from the mixed-use definition. We took the mixed-use definition and put all of those items in a new line in the table in Chapter 1504 for mixed-use development. Perfect. Sorry, my brain had to stop for a second. And then we also have the last one in a parking table. We have a duplicative footnote. So footnotes 3 and 4 in our land use zoning table essentially say the exact same thing with a different percentage of requirement for parking. And we had it written in a code book somewhere that one of them was meant for senior development and one wasn't. And so that was the interpretation that we've been using for years. I was able to go back and track back in 2012 when we did this update that it was in fact one of the footnotes is supposed to say for senior development and was deleted on accident at that time. So this is to fix that and make that code section easier to use. And that is it. I zipped through that really fast, so if you have any questions, I'm available.
Thank you, Kaelene. Team, any questions for Kaelene? Great report. Thank you. I'm going to ask for a motion, please.
Chair, I move to adopt ordinance number 4456, amending various provisions within the Kent City Code to correct errors and provide clarity in the city's zoning code and development regulations.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All opposed? Let the record show unanimous pass. Thank you. Okay. Move on to item F, it's resolution to establish fee. Mr. Gilbert.
Good evening, council members. Matt Gilbert, ECD Deputy Director. I'm here tonight with a fairly kind of common bit of business that comes up around budget time. Not every year, but many years, with our fee resolution. This isn't all of the city's fees. These are fees related to business licensing and development and a few other miscellaneous items. But when I say development fees, it can get pretty detailed because there are a lot of them that pertain to many, many different situations because we try to capture fees for our services that are commensurate with the amount of time we spend on reviewing and inspecting all of these different types of development. So it's kind of a thick packet with lots of numbers and lots of categories. So if you have any questions about those, I'd be happy to answer, but they get pretty esoteric. So what I'd like to do is just quickly describe sort of what we're up to. As things change, when new rules are adopted, we end up with new processes. When we do any kind of reorganization internally, we need to clarify this document. So that's what we've done here. They're really minor changes for the most part. I'll give you a few examples. With Rally the Valley industrial design standards come a need for staff to review those applications for these better looking new industrial buildings. That's something we need to capture our time for, but it's not listed in our current fee schedule, so we've added an item for that. The Puget Sound Regional Fire Authority is part of our development team. They charge for inspections for fire suppression systems within buildings. Today they charge a flat fee. They're proposing to charge a more a la carte fee so that the more systems exist in a building, the more money gets paid instead of it being across the board. So again, that's just a kind of an operational tweak. It won't really result in any new revenue, but it will just be a more fair allocation of those revenues. So one other is we are now getting a lot of small cell permits for the 5G network that the various carriers are deploying. They're scrambling to permit their little new cell towers on poles, utility poles throughout the city. But they're a long way from doing that. They're getting permits now, though they won't do the work for a long time. So we're having to track these permits and renew the permits, and we're adding a fee to actually capture some payment for our time to keep those open and keep track of those. So again, these are fairly small additions to this document that are revenue-wise are really negligible, but it's important that staff has the direction from the council to know what to charge for these various activities. So that's the reason for the clarification. You'll see that there are numbers that have been updated also within the document. That's to reflect the policy from the council and the fee resolutions going back to 2011 that raises the fees each year automatically with inflation. So every time we touch this document, we update those numbers so that they're current. So this is not a new policy, it's a standing policy that we've continued in the current resolution. So that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer questions.
I don't have any detail here with me. So as far as the true impact to, let's say, the citizen, are there any impact to the citizen with some of these fee increase?
The increases themselves, I mean, yeah, it's part of.
Large impact, I mean, relative was.
No, this will just apply to development.
Developers only?
Time of permitting or business licenses, which I don't think are changing, but.
Okay.
Yeah, average resident of Kent won't experience anything.
Okay, good. Councilman Fincher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is your definition of we won't see the sales for a long time? And then also, what parts of town are they doing it all over Kent, more downtown, more East Hill?
The answer to your first question is it depends. The 5G system is a brand new technology that is based on the small cells that I think you all might be familiar with just from the regulations that were passed a couple of years back. They're kind of it's a cell tower that's on a pole. Well, there's a lot of complexity to that. There's the matter of installing the equipment. There's also the matter of getting power to that equipment. So there's coordination that needs to happen with PSE. There's coordination with the city. And these companies are working through all of that complexity right now. Now, in the meantime, they're reserving, they're taking out permits to do the work now so that they can reserve the poles for their own equipment. So they're able to extend those permits as long as they need to, so that they can get their project in order to do the construction. So we don't really know. It's an emerging technology that no one really has experience with. And so we just want to be prepared and not have to track those over long periods of time and invest the time and energy without getting paid for that.
Thank you.
It's a small fee to keep those open. And your other question was, where are they, right? They'll be throughout the city eventually. Where those are deployed first is kind of based on the carriers, where they think the opportunity is.
And what you're seeing so far, are they mostly the new installs instead of putting them on existing poles? And
it's really a mix right now. Frankly, the primary thrust that we're seeing is they're building kind of the underground infrastructure to serve all of these. Okay. They call it the backbone, and that's going up. I think it's on East Valley Highway largely. So we're not really seeing the installations of the individual cells going in yet. But I think a lot of areas of the East Hill will probably be some of the first areas we see, because that's just kind of where we're seeing interest. But we're a ways off at this point.
Thank you.
Councilmember McCord?
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Matt, for the presentation. And I completely understand that we have updates and everything, but I was looking through the resolution and the exhibits and everything, but I didn't really see, I guess I needed to go back to look at the old ordinance and compare these two. I was kind of curious about the difference and how much it's going to increase and how much it's going to, be an increase for developers to, get their permits in our city, basically. So
Sure.
Maybe not tonight, but if you're able to get those numbers, I'd like to see them.
Okay, I'd be happy to provide those.
Thank you.
All righty. And as you share with Councilman McCoy, you can send to everybody else as well, too, okay?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I was like, who was that talking to me?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to segue off of Councilmember Fincher's question. Matt, could you map out or provide a map of the poles that have already been permitted?
Yes, I could provide
Is that
that.
something you could provide us with?
Yeah, Councilmember Thomas, I can do that. I'd be happy to send that. In fact, I'd have to check on the completeness of that work, but we are tracking those applications through GIS. So we'll have a map available. Again, I'd have to speak with one of our staff members to make sure that's up to date before I send that, but I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Are you good?
Yeah, and I'm not asking for any and all. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Go
Can I
ahead.
follow up? So, Matt, I'm not asking for the whole completion. I just want to know where they are as of this point, or a given point, like 31st of December or something like that. And if you could kind of show us that map, that would help kind of explain or answer the Councilmember Fincher's concern about where these are at, East Hill, West Hill, down the valley. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. Any more questions? Don't see any. Can I ask for a motion, please?
Chair, I move to repeal resolution number 2022 and adopt resolution 2052, implementing new fees to be effective January 1st, 2023.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Let the record show unanimous pass. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Move on to item G. This is around remote meeting for our commission members. And Pat.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, Council. I am here to start you off on a conversation. And so tonight, what we're doing is presenting to you the concept of moving your commissions, boards and commissions, to a system where they can meet remotely if that's what the council desires. So if you recall, we did our major amendment to our code regarding our boards and commissions. You all debated at that time whether or not these should be, whether or not remote attendance should be permitted. And there were two that you landed on as being permitted for now. And those two were the, let's see here, the Firefighters Relief and Pension Fund Board and the Left One Disability Board. And the reason those two, at that time, you decided to allow for remote attendance was there's statutory constraints on who can be on that board. They are folks who very well may not live in the area at all. They might be out of state. And also, I think Ms. Komodo testified that it's very, very difficult to get people who qualify to be participating on that board. So, but a lot has changed since then, and we've had our boards and commissions in operation mode under COVID for quite a while. And so the question is whether or not you want to move and amend the ordinances that you passed to allow for remote attendance. There's been a change to the Open Public Meetings Act. And there are only two of your commissions that aren't subject to the OPMA, and that's the Bicycle Advisory Board and the Cultural Communities Board. Though you have stated in the ordinance that was passed that you would agree, because you'd agree to follow the OPMA. That doesn't mean you have to, though. You can pull that back if you want to. So essentially, all the boards and commissions do fall under the OPMA. And there's a recent statute that passed, so state law passed to change the OPMA such that board members can attend the meetings remotely, but if they do attend remotely, you have to have a place within the city for the public to come and sit and watch the meeting. So if you move forward with doing remote attendance, we will have to make sure that a meeting space is still here in the city. And if somebody wants to sit and watch and listen to the meeting, we have to make sure we avail them to that opportunity. So that's the issue. The question is whether or not you want us to proceed. And if you do want us to proceed with this, what we would do is I'd ask the law department to draft amendments to the ordinance that allow for remote attendance. There are things that that you would want to consider, and the first one is the Public Facilities District Board. We've got that mentioned in our ordinance, but it's really the Public Facility District. And you can ask them, I think, but I don't think you can demand their meetings change to remote. I would recommend you not, because we hold them at the Showware Center, and we are going to have some technological issues if we have to change that one to remote. So that's the one that I would ask that you pay particular attention to on the no side. Otherwise, there's things you might want to consider, whether or not you want to limit the number of times somebody can attend remotely, whether you want to limit or require some members to be there, or at least one member in the room, because theoretically under the statute you could have a board where no board member is present, but there's somebody sitting in the room watching it on TV or listening to it over the speakers. So that's another thing to consider. And then there's other technical little things that you can consider, whether you would require cameras be on for your board members, commission members, whether they'd have to have faded backgrounds. We could do that in policies and whatnot if we wanted to, but it's something that we can consider on the staff side. Finally, there has been, you saw it a few weeks ago, some technological challenges in this room. IT has been working on a project, correct me if I'm wrong, to make what we call mixed meetings run more smoothly, where some people, for example, a city staff meeting, if we have some people in attendance and we have an outside vendor who's attending remotely, and I think James, his group is going to be doing some testing in the next week or two on the camera side of it. We have the video screens ready. We need the camera side teed up and ready to go, and they're going to be testing that shortly. So that technology will be there. It might take till the end of January to get it so that we are smooth and consistent. Chambers North and South is one of the first places that's going to happen. And I know that we do run a couple of boards and commissions out of that meeting room. So there's the picture. And I guess I just open it up for you guys to discuss, and I will be taking notes, and we'll follow the council's direction once you make a decision on this.
Sounds good. I would say I agree with the PFV. I think that's a no-brainer for all of us, hopefully. There's probably going to add a lot of complexity to what we are trying to do. I'm sure we'll be able to talk through and work through it. And then staff time, what is going to cost? Not cost, but I'm assuming it's going to create additional staff time to be here, just in case.
Well, they have to be here anyway.
They have to be here anyway.
I don't think the staff time's going to be the issue. I mean, they're here. We already put some of our board meetings on Teams, and that's what we do. That we would not be airing them live on television like council meetings and committee, like your meetings are. We would not be doing that. That's not going to change. So, and some of these boards allow for people in the public to communicate, and some of them don't. And so we just have to manage through that process. But you theoretically could have a TV sitting in this room with people on the TV and a member of the public listening in on the meeting, and that's what it would do.
Okay. All right. I got some questions. I don't know, and we could talk about it. I mean, does that mean at least one person on that committee have to be here, or can they all be remote? So we could
remote as long as we put something in here so somebody from the public can come and watch.
All right. We'll start with Councilmember Troutner, followed by Larmer.
Thank you, Council President. And I think Councilmember Michaud is probably going to speak a little bit about where this is coming from. But is this mainly because we have a few groups where people need to meet remotely, or where is a majority of this needing to come from?
So I'm going to turn it over to
Okay.
I can answer that. So this is coming from, I serve on the Human Services Commission, and the issue was that before this new change, we were meeting remotely. Everyone was remote on the in the meeting. And then they found out about this new rule, and so it was too difficult to do that. So we were meeting in person. The problem is that on that commission, we have people who don't necessarily live in the city. They're service providers, so they may work in Seattle or wherever, and they can't leave work to come in and be in person, but they can meet, virtually.
So a couple questions. I know it's unique to that group. Is it unique to any other groups that we have that are meeting that all of a sudden this is a difficult thing for them to meet in person?
I'm not aware of
Okay.
that. So I don't have that information from each board. I can ask staff who staff those boards and commissions. It sounds like Councilmember Michaud's statement is consistent with why we went to remote meeting with the Disability Retirement Board and the Left One Board. I mean, if people are out of the area. So with as far as the other meetings go, I don't know, and I don't see. I think most of them are probably local residents.
Do we get into trouble if we change and make just an exception for the Human Services group, or do you suggest we kind of look at this across the board?
I think you can do whatever you would like. I mean,
We're already doing it for disability and left one,
Right. So I just want to make sure if we were just to look at that, that's not going to create these other groups saying, well, wait a minute, if they do it, why can't we do it?
well, and that might happen, and you can always make another change if you want. We have staff members who staff these boards and commissions, and they're consistent, so they'll know how this board works or that board works. So, and Kim has a really handy dandy, of course she does, sheet that tells everybody what they have to do, and how the board meeting is going to go or commission meeting is going to go. So I don't think that's a problem at all.
Councilman Michaud, you get anything else you want to add?
I just wanted to add a little bit more. An idea I had that I think could work is that we leave it up to the chair as to whether or not the meetings are held remotely or one person can show up or all that kind of nuance.
How often would that change, though? You get chair, so each chair, when you rotate, they get to dictate? Okay. Councilmember Larmer?
Thank you. I actually, I don't know, it's a modern workplace. I don't have a problem with remote meetings. I think the only hiccup I would see is I feel like if the committees have public exchange or public comment of some degree, I think you would need one person in the room, because how else would you know somebody's, in the room and wants to speak? So. I think as long as we are staying true to, open meetings and the ability to comment when that is part of the agenda, I have no problem with remote attendance. We attend our regional meetings remote. We've been doing it for going on 3 years now, and don't see a problem with that.
Okay. Councilman McCord.
Thank you, Council President. I had a couple of questions. They've been answered, but one of them, like Councilmember Larmer said, I don't have any problem with remote meetings because we're sort of used to that by now, and I think it might help with attendance and even recruiting, new members to our boards and commissions. I think it gives us the flexibility. I think a couple of questions I have is, I don't know if we want to make an exemption just for one board or commission. I think we should just look at it overall, because we might in January have another board saying we want to be remote, and then February we're doing it again. So you just kind of look at it and figure out what the best path forward is, because I think, and then I think maybe a staff, who are, staffing those committees or those boards and commissions, they know best. So maybe they can guide us in what they think is, maybe we require cameras to be on, I don't know.
Yeah.
If there's a concern about participation, we can require cameras to be on, because that's what some workplaces do. But so that's where I'm
Okay.
at.
I think we all agree on the PFD, though. That's exclusion, right? We all agree on the PFD, not? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Back.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Please,
Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Thomas.
Thank you. I really think this is a good idea. I can think of two examples that I'm aware of. One is in our Fireman's Pension and Relief meeting. We have two members in particular that are oftentimes out of town, Idaho, hunting, or down in Arizona, vacationing, whatever. But this would be really a lot better for them. And then in the Civil Service Commission, we have some commissioners, one in particular that lives out of town, drives all the way to the city, and in the meeting may only last 5 minutes. Quite common, actually. And so, you know, he drives all that way, and then all of a sudden, very short meeting, yet he wastes his gas, et cetera. So I think this is a good policy to set.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you. I had a question about the tech support. So the fixes that they're making, as far as for this room, we've had meetings in here where it was hard for the people in the room to be heard by the people who were on the screen and vice versa. So would that be fixed, the audio?
We're going to try.
Okay.
You see how technology is finicky. You know, there's times I'm sure you get on meetings and somebody can't get on. I was just in a meeting earlier today where somebody making a presentation couldn't get on, so they had to use their telephone for audio and their video. So there will be problems. We know that. That's our experience, right? But we get creative as we can. You saw what happened in this room where everything just blinked out on us for the council meeting. So we're trying to get some technological fixes, but it's not unique to Kent. Other agencies have the same issues come up.
So hopefully you guys will figure that out and it'll be up and running
The
without
man
those
back there in the
glitches.
middle, right there, with his hand folded. That's the one you need to talk to, okay?
And then, you know, for me, I was thinking that the people, the board members, it's okay. I think of what we do. So if you have to miss a meeting, then you're, wherever you are, you're on the screen. I think the camera should be on. So I know for some people who are in the viewing audience, it's seen as a sign of respect also. So I think that the camera should remain on. And I was leaning toward you have to have the majority of the people here if we're going to have people in the chairs. But being the modern workplace, I would be okay with doing it with having people remote, but still I would like the cameras on. I think if you sign up to do one of the boards or commissions, usually you know that you're going to be coming to the meeting. I do agree that it's much more convenient to be able to do it from where you are. I wouldn't want to, some of our meetings are in Seattle and having to drive there, but just being considerate. Again, I think that there should be something set up as to there at least always one person in the room. I know with us, you can't chair a meeting if you're not in the room. So unless it's some situation where it's weather or something like that, if it's just every meeting, there's no one showing up to the meeting. I don't think that's a good thing. So I think we need to have something in place stating whether we're going to have people be present, and especially if you're going to be chairing the meeting.
Yeah, I don't know about the, when you talk about having the video, the camera, I'm not sure we can require it. I mean, to me, I would think that'd be more of a personal matter for us having a camera on. I don't know if we can say, I don't know if we can require it. We can ask, but I'm not sure we can require it.
Can we require that?
I think you could.
I think so.
You could say as a condition of attending remotely, you must have your camera on. You could do that. More of a, attending remotely is a privilege, and with that privilege comes the fact that you need to have your camera on.
Okay.
Yeah. You
could do that.
Okay.
Nothing that would prohibit you from doing that.
There are companies I know of that say, if you're going to work remotely, then you have to have everything up and running to allow you to work remotely as if you were here in the office.
Everybody can let them know that. One question. The mostly committee, you got to have a quorum, right? So, I mean, sometimes you get remote, people don't show up. So if you don't have everybody there, then I guess you just cancel the meeting, I guess, right? If you don't have a quorum, right? I guess same if they show up.
If they show, yeah.
All right.
Same thing in person.
Yeah, okay, all right, good. All right, cool. I'm going to go back to Councilmember Show.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's hard enough to find people to serve on these boards, and so the more restrictions that we give them, like requiring to have their camera on, some people don't, aren't great with technology, and the more leeway we can give them and the more, give those chairs that opportunity to make those types of decisions makes it more meaningful and worthwhile to them. So I just think we need to keep those things in mind. I know there are several positions open on many of our boards and commissions, so we just need to keep that in mind as well.
Okay. Councilmember Troutner, followed by Fincher.
Thank you, Council President. So a couple things. So right now, we do not have cameras or film any of these meetings because people are coming to them, correct?
Correct. We are not going to record the meetings. We're
Either
not
way.
going to do video recordings of these meetings.
And so what we're saying is that if we did decide we wanted to let people participate remotely, someone has to be there so someone can come and watch it in public if they want to.
Staff member will need to be here. So if you had let's say you're the Human Services Commission, there would be, I believe, this technology would be a TV in the middle of this room where you can see the meeting and hear the meeting, I think.
And that's regardless if people come. You have to have that space.
You will have to have that space.
How many
And there
people?
will also be somebody probably running the meeting at that desk.
So right now, how many people from the community actually come to any of these meetings to participate or listen?
I can't answer that question. I think some, none. Others,
take-
maybe a couple.
I think it's something that we
Good one.
need to consider when we're talking about, because, you say that it's not going to be any staff time or any extra cost, but I think there is something associated with that, so something to consider. But I think we need to look at these committees and ask them as a whole, what each committee is interested in doing. Because if they're already meeting in person and it's working for them, it just seems like a lot of work to create now this extra function if it's already working. I think that that's something that we need to consider.
I think to get back what Xander, Councilmember Shaw was saying, leave it up to the chair. Each chair get to decide. I think that's what you were saying, right, Xander? Chair decide how they want to hold the meeting. So, okay, Councilmember Fincher.
I was just going to say on the quorum question, I hope people would still do like we do now.
Yeah.
We're in contact with the chair, so, before the meeting, if there's going to be a meeting or not. Would there still be the requirement for canceling a meeting that we have now, public notification?
Oh, yeah. Nothing else changes.
So with that, I think people still need to be in contact.
I agree. Councilmember Larmer.
So just to clarify, we're not directing that they have to have remote meetings. We are giving them the option.
That's up to us.
Okay.
That's what we're talking about, yes.
Okay.
That's what we're getting at.
Okay. And then I think on the matter of having your camera on, I agree with Councilmember Fincher. I think that it's a bit of a respect thing, and I think it also would help prevent, having participants, log in, have a camera, no camera on and just go about their business and not be paying attention. I mean, I think if you can commit to being in a seat and being present in a meeting in person, we should have the same expectation remotely.
On that point, the reason I was grabbing Kurt is sometimes Land Use and Planning Board has hearings. And so under those circumstances, I think it's important to make sure that people are seen because there are other people in the public who have an interest in their matter being heard. And so I think maybe at least in that committee, I think it's a good idea that cameras are on. You're also, under those circumstances, you are recording it. It's one of the rare times that we would record, and it becomes a record for the court down the road. So in that circumstance, I would say definitely that's probably something to think about. Civil Service Commission, possibly the same thing, because some of the decisions the civil service makes can be appealed. And so we need to preserve a record under those circumstances.
Seems like for consistency, it might be wise to.
Let me ask you a question. So, let's say camera required, okay? I go home, I'm ready for the meeting, and my camera's not working. Do the meeting stop or the meeting goes on? From some technical reason, my camera's not working. How will you perceive it? That if you're going to require it, because that will happen because of technology. That's why I have a problem with making that camera. We can say we desire to have the camera, but you make it required. I'm on a meeting, I'm ready to go, and my camera's not working. You don't have a quorum because my camera's not working. Do we stop the meeting? Team, what do you think? I don't know. Seth, what do you think?
I think we have to decide.
Okay, go ahead.
Is this where we want to go?
That's what, yeah.
Where we want to make sure that we allow this option for remote meetings? If we don't, then it's not an issue.
Any comments from you, Warmer?
I think I have a hard time imagining that you can get into the meeting, but you can't.
That just happened to me on an SCA meeting. My camera was not working.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I did everything you can, and I'm
Could
called Mike, and he couldn't fix it either, right? So,
Could
no,
we
just
write
kidding.
it to where like that could be something the chair approves in the moment?
Okay.
Okay. But the standard would be your camera would be on.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. Seth, are you okay with that?
Yeah, and I think we certainly, I guess my question to you, Chair, is are we making that decision tonight? Are we kind of waiting, leaving this to the chairs? Which direction are we going? I mean, I'm okay with remote meetings requiring cameras.
I'm okay with remote meeting requiring camera. I'm okay with the chair of the committee making that decision.
I'm okay with both of those, too.
Yeah. That's two of us. All right. Let's see. I'm sorry. Councilmember Fincher.
I've also had that happen where my camera would not come on, although the microphone was on, so I could join the meeting. I would say the meeting goes on and it's up to the chair. But if you see somebody continually, their camera is always off, then that's going to be when that needs to be looked at.
Now, see, Les got his thumbs up, so he's okay. Okay, thank you, Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Michelle?
I don't think Les's fingers are coming down. Oh, they do.
Oh, okay. All right. He's in slow motion. Leave Les alone.
Okay, so
Camera froze.
I am good with letting the chair decide whether they're remote,
Okay?
with the exception of the ones we talked about earlier. Not a huge fan of making people have their cameras on, but if that's what council wants, I'll go with that.
Well, I'm not either. I'm going to go with the flow, right? So I'm giving in. So, sound like, if I'm correct, we're going to lead him, the chair run the meeting. The chair will make a decision. If somebody, for some reason, their camera is not working, it'll be the chair decision to kind of, I'm assuming to proceed with the meeting. You want a quorum, you probably go ahead. As long as there's not a consistent pattern, then that's still leave it up to the chair. And we talked about the other one that would be excluded for as being remote. And those, could you repeat those again, Pat?
So that
please?
would be the PFD.
Yep.
Civil service.
And no, I think civil service is okay. That's just one that might require the camera on for a hearing.
Okay.
So I would like to have any public hearing that occurs at any of these committees be cameras on,
Yep.
Yeah.
with no exception, unless there's technological breakdown, if that's okay with you.
Yep. Totally agree. Councilman Fincher, you good?
Aye.
Okay. Councilman Michelle?
Yeah, is Land Use and Planning Board, because they have a lot of public hearings, you think
That
we're
would be
good?
one where the camera would be on during a public hearing.
Okay. So,
Human Services Commission?
yeah, that was one. Yeah, the Human Service.
You occasionally have official public
Yes,
hearings?
yeah.
Okay, okay.
Okay. So, Pat, you want to summarize? You think you got what we are asking for? What the team agree on, I should say.
All right, so for the advisory commissions, the boards and commissions, the chair will have the option of allowing for a remote meeting. Cameras will be on. If there's a technical problem, chair can make an exception. And if there's a public hearing, cameras will be on.
Okay.
And there is the exception of the, so I think that's it.
Okay. So I think going forward, I'm assuming Kim, whoever, so when no chair rotate, do we have a job, just responsibility for each chair? I mean, because they need to know.
You actually mentioned something interesting.
Yeah.
it's going to be important that the chair of the committee can run a remote meeting.
Yeah.
Some people aren't real
Yeah.
good at that.
Yep.
So,
And who set these meetings up? I mean, if they remote, so do Kim set them up, or is the chair set them up?
yeah.
Which
I don't
could
think the
another
chair doesn't set them up.
Okay.
I'm not
Okay.
sure if Kim
All right.
does or if the person from the department.
Thank you, Kim Komodo, City Clerk. The document that Pat passed out to you, it
Did not
shows.
pass it out.
Oh, you didn't, okay. We've got this form, and we'll give it to you. It's got a contact person on it, and that's the staff member that's in charge of scheduling the meetings, all meetings are Zoom. And then they're responsible for distributing the agendas and then drafting the minutes and finalizing the minutes, and doing all that formal process. So we have staff members assigned to each one of these, and they're all very familiar with running remote meetings right now.
Gotcha. Thank you, Kim.
Yep.
That take care of that. I guess the other question I would ask the team is based on what Pat was saying earlier with the technology. I mean, should we say effective date 1st of February? Give them a chance to work it out?
Give us some time.
Yeah.
Really, really appreciate it.
That's enough time?
No, I'm looking at IT and there's a guy in the back of the room saying, nope.
And that's the same person I gave all those compliments to a couple meetings ago saying no. I might have pulled some of those back, guys, huh?
We say start at Q2.
Yeah. When you want to start, Mike? Q2?
Let's go with Q2.
Okay. Are we okay with that, team? Sandra, you okay?
I don't know.
That's
Not in business.
That's April. April 1. April Fool Day.
Exactly.
So are we okay with that, guys? I mean, that's,
Mike, is that the soonest, really?
Take your bets, Mike.
Good evening, Council. Mike Carrington, IT Director. Devil's always in the details. The chambers area is one that's fundamentally overseen by the Multimedia and Communications Group. We look to partner with them to try and help ensure that the technology is going to meet expectations and needs. We've got a citywide initiative, and that's really what Pat was referring to earlier, that we refer to as the Connected Conference Rooms Initiative. And that's an effort to try and help ensure, on the heels of everyone having gone remote during COVID and now coming back, subsequently having come back, being able to support the city's policies of being able to have folks that are mixed between local and on-site as well as remote. So we're going through a Microsoft Teams-based initiative to try and help ensure that we can facilitate that. Now, the council chambers, as you might imagine, is quite a bit more complicated than that. And our original plans were to get through the conference rooms as a part of the Connected Conference Rooms initiative throughout the city, and then come back and partner with Patty in an effort to try and ensure that the council chambers meets all new and emerging expectations, as well as those that were in place before all of this actually started. So this room tends to be a little bit more complicated. That's why, despite all the more recent compliments that everyone's gotten with regard to the technology that's been deployed, that we can meet the more demanding needs and expectations for this room. So I'm not trying to avoid a date, but I always think it's good to have a measure out there or a line in the sand that we're trying to meet or hit, despite knowing that this room's going to be much more complicated than the rest of the city. So I like having that to shoot for. We'll be sure to circle back and provide updates from both an accomplishments perspective as well as a timeline perspective with that topic in general, if that sounds good.
we want to be successful. We're not going to rush it, right? So, I mean, we got to do the right thing. Yes, I like to have it early, but we are where we are, so I get it. Councilmember Lammer.
Question, though, Mike. Given that this is a specific pain point that's creating conflict on a specific committee, I mean, I'm looking at less remote right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason we couldn't do that, like what we're doing tonight as a stopgap measure for the Human Services Commission?
No, and I think that makes a lot of sense, especially if we can kind of divide and conquer. To your point, we can address what are the immediate needs with specific groups, and then the other ones that maybe don't have necessarily a more complicated scenario associated with them. Those might end up being much easier and can be swept into the full scope of the effort.
Is it really that different, the meeting we're having right now with less remote and having a meeting for the Human Services Commission that's not broadcast, but with some remote attendees?
Right. No, to your point, I think on the surface it does sound like that is something that, because of the way that that's structured, should fall in place pretty easily. I'm just hesitant without having actually talked to those folks about exactly how they're running those committees to making a full-fledged commitment that we could get all that done sooner rather than later. But to your point, Councilmember, I do think that's a sane approach to take. We'll probably end up being low-hanging fruit that we can deal with because it's for all intent and purposes mostly already been dealt with. To your point.
Okay. Councilor McCord, you have a question?
Councilmember Larmer actually already kind of asked that, but Councilmember Show, what would help your commission to be successful since April is kind of...
Well, what we had been doing was kind of like what we're doing now, was we would just have a meeting and then some people are remote. I don't know if that was allowed, but that's what we've been doing. So until April, we'll continue to do that, I guess.
Yeah. How often do Human Service meet? Once a month? Okay.
Once a month.
Cool. Okay, we're going to wrap this up here. Councilman Larmer, you okay?
I'm good.
Councilman Fincher?
Yeah. Would it be possible that we could say then, so that you are within the law, that we, as soon as possible, so they're able to meet now, they're doing it so they can just continue. We meet in this room. I'm in two groups that meet in this room, and meeting up here is different than when we meet out there. We have the tables set up out there, and that's where we have the problems. So I think it's probably something with the way these microphones are wired and the connections they've made, because when we're sitting out there, we definitely have problems hearing between people. We can see them without a problem, but cannot always hear what they're saying.
So are we okay with going the second quarter? I mean, because if we say yes, you have technical problem, it's not Mike's problem because he already told you he got some skepticism about it, right? So I would say let's go with second quarter. Xandra, I think if you already running something in the meeting where you have been running, I would say power on, right? And if you've been successful, then fine. But I think if it was a commitment from Mike, I think we should shoot for second quarter, April 1st. And if you exceed expectation like you always do, then you can come back to us and let us know.
No pressure. Right.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. I'll be good. Team.
Can I just...
Yes,
I'm
please.
sorry.
Yep.
It's the former lawyer in me not wanting to stop talking. So our ordinance right now doesn't really allow for this. So we have to change our ordinance. So we're going to have to draft the ordinance and then come back to council for approval of the ordinance so we can do this.
Or has Xandra followed the law?
We have a local law.
The local laws.
We have to make sure our local law is consistent with what you guys are doing. So what I will do is ensure, there's a couple lawyers in the room that have been listening to this. And they're like, oh, man. So we will have a draft ordinance to you at the next council meeting for debate and consideration, and hopefully we can get it passed right then and there. And it would be it would be a 30-day ordinance, 30-day effective date.
Just call it the Michaud ordinance, okay? Councilman Michaud, please.
I don't actually run that meeting.
You're not getting out of it.
No.
You're not going to get out of it. It's your meeting and your ordinance, okay? All right, fair enough.
I have enough direction. Thank
you, sir. Appreciate it. Appreciate it, guys. Okay, good debate, good conversation. Let's move on here. Item H, Tara Duckworth. How you doing?
I am.
Good.
Good evening, Council President, council members, and future council members. I'm Tara Duckworth. I'm the Deputy Director of Information Technology, and tonight I'm bringing you an information memo. This memo shares Amendment 1 to our Managing Services Agreement with Rimini Street. Rimini Street provides on-call support for our JDE financial system and our Kiva permitting system Oracle databases. We want to make sure you're aware with this information memo that we're adding an Amendment 1, which exercises the 5-year option that's already in the managing service agreement to extend the MSA for another 5 years. So it'll extend that through 2028. We currently have 2 statements of work under that MSA. One is for Rimini Street to support the JDE system on-call support for that, and the other is support of the Kiva Oracle databases. Extending the managing service agreement for 5 years does not necessarily extend the statement of work. Either of those statement of works for 5 years does give us the option to do that if we need to, but it does not automatically extend those.
Okay.
Any questions?
We're pretty self-explanatory. Any question, team, on this one here? This is information only, yeah. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Brian, I think I mute less you coming up here, so make sure he treats you nice. Okay. Brian, talk about some consultant amendment, please.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Council President, members of the Council, Brian Rambunga, PMO Manager, IT Department. Here to present for authorization amendment number 4 to our consultant services agreement with Robert Half International. IT seeks council approval to continue its consultant services agreement with this agency, so long as those costs associated can be paid for within budgets established, authorized by council for the 2023-2024 biennium. City will pay consultants from this agency, Robert Half International, for services provided through December 31st, 2023, in an amount not to exceed $740,000. Quick priority to point out is this not to exceed amount is part of the $2.2 million approved by council for IT staffing agency budget for the coming biennium. That recent approval included our new agreements with Tech Systems, Protingent Incorporated, and Affirma LLC. That was brought forward to this committee 2 council meetings ago. That really just concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions or concerns.
So this is something new that we missed while we make an amendment, so why this coming back?
No, this one is existing. It is amendment number 4. The reason why this one took a separate path than the other 3 agencies is the other 3 agencies were adopting completely new agreements. This one, we're sticking with the existing agreement that we've had through 2019 because we have 2 consultants that we're going to be leveraging in IT through the next biennium that Robert Half didn't agree to new terms and conditions for the new agreement that we're going to be leveraging with them. Because the existing agreement has a bit more favorable terms and conditions, IT with Kent Legal as well as with Robert Half, we just decided to keep them on the existing agreement versus leverage something new. Once these 2 consultants we've termed with them, we'll be adopting a new agreement that we're going to be bringing forward with HR.
Got it. Councilman McCoy, you light up?
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Brian. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about and you're not using as many consultants, I guess. So I see that with this contract, there was increase. So is that due to just inflation or?
No, so the previous amendments or the previous agreements that we had sought council approval for a couple of weeks ago, that $2.2 million, this $740,000 applies to just Robert Half and is inclusive of that $2.2 million. Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Thomas, you have any question for Brian?
No, I just want to tell him it was a good job.
Oh, okay. Try to get back on your good side, Brian, but don't let him, okay? Okay. All righty. No question. Councilman Michaud, I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you, Council President. I just have a question. This might be a typo. Under budget impacts, it says $74,000, but in the motion, it's $740,000.
It's $740,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good catch. With that said, Councilman, who making the motion here?
You ready? Mr. Chair, I move to authorize the mayor to sign Amendment Number 4 to the Consultant Services Agreement with Robert Half International Incorporated in an amount not to exceed the previously established budget of $740,000 through December 31st, 2023, subject to final terms and conditions acceptable to the IT Director and City Attorney.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Let the record show unanimous pass. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it, bud. Okay, moving along. We're on item number J. Michelle Ferguson.
Hello again. Michelle Ferguson, Financial Planning Manager, presenting the October 2022 monthly financial report. So this presentation will look a little bit different than it normally does once the screen stops clicking out.
There you go. IT problems. See?
I know.
Way to go, Mike. Good job.
Okay.
He did it on purpose.
This is going to be on page 1 of the report, and there's going to be a little bit of difference on the way this looks than on the September report.
Just proceed. Nothing you can do about it. Just proceed.
Okay, so first page, it was on page 1, and it was looking at the kind of overview of revenue, high-level revenue expenditures of the general fund. What isn't included in here are the budget changes that were adopted in the Q3 adjustment, so that large transfer out of the general fund into the insurance funds. So there is a unfavorable variance for the dollar amount and the percentage, just so you're aware of that. So, which then changes what the ending fund balance and percentage of that would be. So in the September report, there was an estimated ending fund balance of $55.4 million. And because we're going to do that large transfer, it drops it now to an estimated fund balance of $47.88 million, which drops it from 43.2% down to 35.1%. So I just wanted to point that out, that when you see that, it will be corrected in the November report once the budget amount catches up to estimated actuals.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So this is, it says page 4, but it's actually on page 6. This is just taking a look at the revenues. So when we kind of compare the actuals of 2020, 2021, and estimated of 2022, you can see there's a large jump of, over $20 million between 21 and 22, and what we're going to expect to see in 2022. And that is, a large part of that is because of the transfers in for the ARPA revenues, which are about $12 million, but all of the revenue categories highlighted in blue, sales tax, B&O, licenses and permits, and charges for services, those have all seen large increases, mostly catching up with recovering from the pandemic, where we saw a kind of a loss of revenues, but also B&O, those were scheduled increases. So if we exclude the ARPA 2022 transfers in, we would expect to see estimated actuals about $124 million, which is still over $10 million of what we were seeing before. So revenues are doing quite well, and we're going to hope that the trend continues next year. And here we are on page 6, taking a look at the expenditures in the general fund. Non-departmental was highlighted because a lot of that is going to be the transfers out, which are mostly about $10 million of that is in 2022 is ARPA related, but then also it includes that $7.65 million transferred out to the insurance funds. So that's what that large difference is. So when you take revenues away from expenditures, we're only going to gain about $200,000 estimating right now. It'll change by the end of the year, but we were expecting to see an impact to the fund balance of $3.9 million. So any positive is going to be a plus.
Yeah, that's great.
And then taking a look at the overview of other funds, not a whole lot of changes going on here. Just wanted to point out Criminal Justice Fund. They were planning on using $1.5 million of fund balance, and instead I'm going to probably net $600,000 to $700,000 in fund balance. That's due to increases in revenues. The criminal justice sales tax revenues have been doing really well, just like the other sales tax revenues, so about $1 million increase over budget. School zone camera, those revenues are coming in on budget, and the red light cameras are going to be probably about $200,000 over budget. And then expenditures are going to come in a little bit lower because they have vehicles that are on order, but they have not been received and probably won't come in until the spring of next year. So those funds will be carried forward into 2023. And the human services, talked about that during the Q4 adjustment, expected to see increased revenues, so we need to budget the transfer out to that holding project for the 60% of those revenues. But they quite haven't gotten going on their expenditures for the co-responder program, so that's why we kind of see a dip in the expenditures. So that will just fall into fund balance until they're ready to use it. The next slide, also on the Q4 adjustment, was talking about sewer. The pass-through to King County was under budgeted, but that will be covered by revenues that are coming in, and then you can see when you compare budget to estimated actuals, we'll cover the difference, no problem. And then solid waste, again, that was for the fines from Republic for the overweight trucks and missed pickups that we're seeing. Normally, we don't budget increase to revenues, but because this fund is running very close on expenditures, we just wanted to go ahead and do that just in case some large expense came in at the end of the year. And the insurance funds, again, those budget changes did not go through in October, so you will see that on the November report. Just wanted to point out the discrepancy of why the budget is lower than the estimated actuals, but that will get cleaned up in the next report. Are there any questions?
Things looking good.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. It's all because of you, Michelle. Okay, any question for Michelle, team? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, Joe.
Can I jump in front of Joe real quick?
No, you may not. Yes, sir, please. Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. I think I said at the next council meeting, which is next week, we're not going to have time. I don't think staff's going to have time to get an ordinance regarding the remote meetings. So
January.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, my apologies.
All right.
Sorry.
Good evening. I'm Joe Bartlemy. I'm the Cash and Investment Officer, and today I am reporting the third quarter cash and investment reports. And this report was presented to the Investment Advisory Board on November 17th. So we have our portfolio summary, which shows our cash in the bank yielding a 2.5% earnings credit. That helps offset our banking fees with the U.S. Bank, overnight maturity because it's cash, and just under $4 million balance at the end of the quarter. Next, we have our short-term liquid portfolio, portion of the portfolio with the Washington State Treasurer, earning 2.57%. That also has the overnight liquidity and a balance of just over $130 million at end of the quarter. Could we go back one slide, please? Thank you. And next we have our long-term portfolio managed by our investment advisors at PFM. That portfolio is currently earning 1.35% yield. That one takes a little bit longer to react to the market increases. That short-term portfolio has very short maturities, so it reacts quicker to the increases in interest rates. The managed portfolio has an average maturity of 914 days, market value of just under $188 million, and investment total of almost $202 million. And as I've mentioned before, that market value reflects an unrealized loss that does not impact the value of the investments at maturity, and it also does not impact the interest yields for those investments. It simply reflects if we would have had to liquidate our portfolio at that point in time, we're required to report that to you. The pie chart below shows the significant balance in the state investment pool in the red, and the U.S. Treasuries in the green, also a significant portion, and all other investment types in the remaining portions. Here we have our 5-quarter comparison of cash and investments by type. We have cash at the bottom there in the green. Currently, I'm keeping just enough cash to cover our short-term needs in our bank account. Moving more money into the state investment pool, we can maximize our interest earnings by moving the money there. We can move it back out as we need it. And then the managed portfolio, our long-term portfolio, stays steady. And total cash and investments at the top is increased year over year. And here we have our 3-year comparison of total cash and investments by type, with 2020 at the bottom, 2021 in the middle, and 2022 at the top. And I'll just point out the mid-year 2021 and 2022, we received those significant allocations from the ARPA grant funding. So larger increase to cash balance than we're used to seeing. And again, year over year increases to the total portfolio balances. And next we have quarterly interest earnings over 5 quarters with the current quarter on the far right. The bar on the left is general fund only, and the right is all other funds combined. And the substantial increase in the 3rd quarter is a reflection of the current interest rates in the market. We're able to maximize our earnings again. Here we have our total cash and investment portfolio by funds. So that total cash and short-term and long-term portfolios. This shows the allocation to each of the individual funds that we have at the city. Significant portions are in the general fund, the capital funds, and the utility funds. And those ARPA funds are in the 1500 Capital Resources Fund. Next, we have the long-term managed portfolio only. This does not include cash or the state investment pool. And the pie chart there shows about a little over half of the portfolios in U.S. Treasuries, about a quarter in corporate bonds, and then the remaining quarter in various other investment types. The lower left-hand corner shows the maturity distribution for our portfolio. And that nicely laddered portfolio will offer us an opportunity to reinvest our funds as investments mature. We'll be able to reinvest at the higher current rates. Next, this slide demonstrates policy compliance. So our current portfolio is well within our city policy requirements. For example, at the top there, U.S. Treasuries, we could have up to 100% of our portfolio in U.S. Treasuries, and we have about 31%. All the various investment types are well within compliance. And lastly, this slide shows the changes in portfolio allocations over 4 quarters, and this is the long-term managed portfolio only. This excludes cash and the state investment pool. And not a lot of change throughout the 4 quarters, but significant changes are in the U.S. Treasuries. We have a little less there and more in the corporate bond section. And that's all I have for you. Any questions?
Good job with the money. Any questions for Joe team?
Nope.
Okay, that's the last thing we have on our agenda item. Councilmember Troutner, you have something you want to share?
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to give a quick update on the severe weather shelter and thank some people that really helped to make it run smoothly last week. On November 29th, the city activated the cold weather shelter. I would like to thank Brenda and Holy Spirit for being the hosts and allowing their doors to be open so that we could accept guests there. I'd also like to thank the AM Kiwanis Club. They provided homemade soup each night, which the people that stayed really appreciated that. I'd like to thank Christine Horn and the Human Services Group because they were instrumental in organizing this, helping to get the word out to people that stayed. Also, all the people that donated items, we put out a list every day and had ways that people could drop off stuff, and we had an abundance of supplies. In fact, enough to probably keep the shelter running when and if we have to reopen. And then Urban League, who helped staff the shelter each night, and the Parks Department on the last day, they sent over a huge crew. We loaded up the trucks, and we got all the supplies moved from one church to the other church. We were open November 29th through December 1st from 9 p.m. until 7 a.m. each morning, and then open again on December 4th. So 4 nights total, and we served an average of 12 people each night. More than half of those were men, and then we had some women, and we had people who brought a couple of their fur friends that were able to get shelter and keep warm. So we couldn't do this without the help of people in our community, the support of the city, and other groups working together to be able to provide a warm place for people to stay. So I anticipate the possibility of opening again throughout the winter, and we'll just keep everybody informed. But again, thank you for the opportunity to provide that warm place for people to stay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Troutner. Anything else from the team? Okay, Les, we adjourn. Thank you.